Welcome to Beyond the Build, the official podcast of Associated Builders and Contractors, North Florida. I'm your host, Kelvin N. Finger. Today, we are joined by Carol Bowen, Chief Lobbyist of Associated Builders and Contractors of Florida. Carol, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kelvin. I'm excited to be with you today at the final moments of 2025, looking at to wrap things up on a really good note.
Yeah, it's been an exciting year. Carol, just so you know, this is episode number 2 of this podcast. So
no pressure.
Episode number 1 drops tomorrow. Hoping we did well on that one, but you and I, we got to keep this audience going.
All right. Let's see how many people we don't alienate in our conversation. I look forward to giving it our best shot.
I'm with you. Let's do it. Well, Carol, I've had the opportunity to know you for a long time. Consider you to be a good friend and certainly a good friend of the industry. Love your work and what you do, but a lot of people don't know exactly who you are, what a lobbyist is, and what ABC does for the industry over in Tallahassee. So I want to just start out with a little bit of background on yourself and, you know, what it means to be a lobbyist, how you got into it, and what your day-to-day in Tallahassee looks like.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm probably 3 offensive things to many people. I'm a transplant from Massachusetts. My husband and I moved here in 2004. And I was doing work for some nonprofits as an in-house government affairs person at the time. And then from there, I decided, while I had my law degree, I didn't want to be a practicing attorney. And so I'm an attorney turned lobbyist, which again, probably is the weirdest combination of things. Some people think it's the worst combination. And then I would say the last thing is I haven't yet found a Florida team other than the Florida Panthers that I'm 100% loyal to. So if we've lost the entire audience by those 3 things, I apologize, but I root for most of the Florida teams. I hope we're doing well. I started with ABC in 2009, towards the end of 2007. Time flies. And at that time, my focus was on local government issues. I was working for one of the chapters within ABC. And what we know to be true as industry members is that not a lot of people understand construction. And no matter whether we're building private or public jobs, you have to interact with governments at all levels. So I cut my teeth on local government issues in South Florida. Plenty of bad ideas stem from here at the local government level. And the more entrenched I got with ABC and the more time I spent with you all, they started sending me up to Tallahassee to help our then chief lobbyist. And over time, he identified that he was going to retire, and I am blessed to have been given the opportunity to represent ABC of Florida statewide on state issues. So pretty much anything that touches Tallahassee on the political and legislative level. And that's sort of how I came to you. So if that was 2007, my gosh, I've been with construction for a while, and I know we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of it all. But I got to tell you, this is one of the best industries out there to work with and to represent. And I look forward to digging in on the things that we do on behalf of the industry and the battles we have in defense of it.
I mean, contractors are just a bunch of lovable people. So, I mean, it's hard, not to just fall in love with us in the industry, right?
Listen, I always say to people, tell me how what we want to do is wrong. We want to go to work. We want to do good work. We want to deliver for the owners of the project, and we want to send everybody home safely. We employ, we train, and we build amazing things. Find something wrong with that, and I'll be amazed, because I'm proud of everything that ABC members do.
Well, that's a great point. And I think, you just find that the vast majority of contractors want to do the right thing, and they don't want a ton of interference or just overburden some regulation in the day-to-day lives of their business. And that's certainly where you come into play, and this political advocacy piece of ABC comes into play. So let's talk a little bit about how members come together and their priorities basically turn into legislative action. So if you would, just kind of tell the listeners, what happens at LegCon, how all that comes together, what you do after that, and what you're doing now as we approach the 26th session, and essentially how all that comes together.
So and I'm going to hit on one of your points that I think I missed on the last time as a lead into this. The biggest thing I can tell you about what it means to be a lobbyist is it's my job to speak on behalf of the commercial construction industry and ABC members to people who don't really necessarily understand the industry or have any experience. And I am not someone who has worked in construction, so it really is a partnership between the members who come together every summer, and we'll dig in on that, to then empowering me to speak on your behalf. And then together we're educating people who are charged with regulating everything our members do in their space. There's a lot of trust and faith in that process. And I think the more time that I spend in Tallahassee, the more important I see the role of the lobbyist being. It's not just making sure people know, who ABC is and what kinds of projects we build. They need someone there every single day watching the conversations they're having, because for as many people who love construction, and we know the important role it plays, there's just as many people who either don't like the industry, turn their nose down at it, or just want to use it as a deep pocket that they can siphon, tax dollars off of. So I think it's critically important that you have someone up there arguing on your behalf and just, defending all the good in the industry and watching out for the bad actors. So how we get there is every summer, members of ABC from around the state come to our summer convention legislative planning conference. It's a great opportunity to both kind of network and meet people from other chapters who you may not get to see very much during the year. And then also sit down and tell me and the lobby team that I get to work with from Gray Robinson, what interferes most in your day-to-day, what would make your day-to-day easier, and then how does all of that help Florida? Because at the end of the day, we've got to sell it. So yeah, the members come together and we talk about everything. It's almost like an open mic session. We try not to limit conversations. We start big picture, and then we do a number of open sharing, open mic moments where people can vent on the things that cause their headaches and heartaches with the industry. And then we start to see trends. Is it building departments? Is it permitting issues? Is it legal matters? What might it be? Is it the costs of materials? What impacts your day-to-day? What hurts it? What helps it? And then where can we plant our flag and say, this is an area that we're going to fix? So the biggest thing for people to know is everything that we do in Tallahassee is member driven, and it is given to the lobbyist from the members. They tell us what they want us to push, and then we work with them to frame the product so that as we're pushing it, it stays true to the initial intent and the initial request. It's really an interesting process. And I thought everybody did that, but we had some legislative guests a couple of years ago who said, I had no idea that this is how you came up with your ideas, and they fell in love with it. And they keep coming back because they want to participate in it more.
It really is the greatest benefit, I think, from this association. I mean, it's happening not only, in the States, but it's happening up in DC, where, we're getting advocacy on our behalf. And we have the opportunity to attend these conferences. And I think 4 or 5 years into, our state legislative planning conference, with you guys, and being able to go there and really voice your concerns and hear other concerns from across the state that, maybe somebody like myself up in Pensacola hasn't really been exposed to the Miami-Dade environment or Orlando and some of the struggles that they have, and being able to kind of share that and hear. Sometimes it can just be refreshing to know that, hey, we got it pretty good in our area compared to other areas of the state, but to hear the struggles from the industry and see those members be able to go voice them there and know that collectively we're coming together and we're trying to do something about it, and we're fighting together. It's just a tremendous benefit that I think a lot of people miss out on.
Just generally speaking, I think it's also a really amazing time to represent an industry that for so long had been looked past, right? We talk all the time about how it was the everybody must go to college push from the generation just before us and our parents. Everybody's got to go to college. And now we see the real life implications of that. And I think for so long, people looked down at industries like construction, which is insane since we need it to exist for all the obvious reasons. But I think we're seeing almost a renaissance in this space where people are coming out of college or maybe even close to graduating high school and saying that none of this office, none of this tech, whatever it might be, that's not what I want. for my life. I want to produce something. I want to put in a hard day's work, and I want to go home at the end of the day without bringing the entire office home with me. It's a really exciting time to be part of the industry and for us to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the career opportunities are just phenomenal in this industry. I mean, we have a workforce shortage. Had Greg Sizemore on in the first episode, we talked about that. Somewhere north of 500,000 skilled tradesmen needed across the U.S. right now. ABC is doing a lot to help fix that issue, and I think we had I say it's one of the biggest wins that we've had in this association in the state was the apprenticeship bill last year. Since we're on that subject and we're talking about what a great opportunity young men and women have to be able to come into this industry with no student debt, be able to get a good paying job and start to climb the ladder. Let's talk a little bit about what we did and your advocacy work on that apprenticeship bill and what that means for this association before we move into something else.
Absolutely. No, I'm happy to do it. The legislation from last year, House Bill 681, was a labor of love and a long-time commitment. Anybody who's listening to this podcast, if you're new to Tallahassee or just new to the legislative process, you often hear that it's like watching sausage be made. And not only that, I would say it's making sausage up a very steep hill over an extended period of time. It doesn't always happen as quickly or as easily as you would want it. But for many years now, we have been trying to get fairness and equitable funding of workforce education programs in Florida, specifically our apprenticeship education programs. Florida does not have a Department of Labor. We used to at one point, and without getting too in the weeds, that department was divided into multiple divisions, Department of Commerce, and then you've got different divisions with Department of Education that all sort of touch this space. And Florida as a state does a tremendous job of funding apprenticeship education. They have for some time. But what happens is they send funds to a state agency like the Department of Education. And then as it works its way down to the intended end user, which in this case is ABC chapters that offer apprenticeship training programs, it doesn't necessarily come at the level that the state intends. That pass-through process from the state to the Department of Education to our required education partners to the apprenticeship provider end user, money sort of gets lost along the way. Stuff gets left on the table is the best I can say it. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. But last year we were able to say, look, it doesn't matter so much how these relationships between the private sector apprenticeship provider and the public sector K-12 school, district, state college, university, it doesn't really matter how they divide their labor so long as the funding split represents their division of labor. So if Kelvin, you are my education partner and you're drawing down those funds and you're going to give them to me and I'm going to do virtually everything, we call that a pass-through. You're our pass-through partner. You should get some level of funding for the way that you're helping us because we can't, as the private sector, access those state dollars without you. But you shouldn't be keeping 60 to 80% per apprentice. And in some cases, that's what was happening. So now everything has to be in writing, copies of contracts and agreements, and then evidence that the split that Kelvin and I will see in this example fairly represents who's doing what in the relationship. Now, ABC doesn't necessarily, we don't love the government interfering with private contract negotiations, but in this instance, it's government dollars going to train people and they weren't getting the best bang for their buck. So our bill requires an insane level of transparency and annual reporting that the state hasn't seen before. And it allows us to go back to Tallahassee and say, listen, you're not getting the best ROI you envisioned for what you're funding. And oh, by the way, it's been a while since you've increased your funding. Look at how much more you could do. But the goal at the end of the day is to train as many apprentices and educate as many apprentices in Florida as we can. And there's a lot of people out there that want to work in this space. So we're just about 6 months into real life after the passage of that bill, and we're hitting some bumps in the road, but we're excited about moving forward in a way that increases our skilled worker bench in Florida.
It just makes perfect sense. And if anybody had the opportunity to see these programs, when the private sector wants to step up and help fix an issue, it's just a no-brainer to support that. Some of these programs, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think we got programs that are graduating nearly 800 students a year out of some of our apprenticeship programs, and that's a huge step in the right direction to fixing the workforce problem that we have, and that's something that we should just all be getting behind. But I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it was a huge win. It was a huge win for our apprenticeship programs, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how that benefits us over time, with more dollars going where it's needed to increase training, increase facilities, and
I
just
also
see how that, it just helps this association across the state.
Sorry, Kelvin. Anybody who listens to us is going to know that I have a propensity for interrupting, so I apologize. But I want to give some big applause to the ABC chapters that are doing work in this space. Not only are they expanding their programs, but they are also just increasing or highlighting the importance of the people graduating from the programs. That number you just said is fantastic, right? But oftentimes we overlook an apprenticeship graduation compared to what, if you're graduating college. So the chapters that are providing these programs have gone to cap and gown services. They're doing things like signing days, like you see college athletes do, or when they're going from high school to whatever college they commit to. And we're really trying to make people who chose this path understand that what they did is incredibly important. And when you see them cross that stage in that cap and gown, they've got their parents there. Some have their families there. Some of them have never missed a classroom because it's a combination of on-the-job training and classroom. Some have had perfect attendance for 4 years. And that needs to be celebrated. And we have to continue to work together to make sure that we're not saying, oh, well, they're just a graduating apprentice. That graduating apprentice is going to have a really nice starting salary. I don't want to misquote it. You could say it better than me. But like you said, zero debt, a skill that very few people in this state, let alone the country, have, and this feeling of independence that they're going to be able to provide for them and their family for their entire future. It's an amazing thing to see.
It is. I mean, it just makes you feel good to see young men and women getting excited about getting back into this industry. And this came up in the last episode when Greg mentioned, this industry touches every corner of every life. And I've been saying that for years too, is everything we have in some way is connected to a contractor, where facilities are built to manufacture food or cars or just the day-to-day necessities, the healthcare facilities, the education facilities, and right down to the house that you live in. Just such an important industry, and we need it, and everybody ought to be supporting it. So it's always interesting to me when I see people kind of fight back against this industry or take shots at it when it's something that's it's just necessity for everyday life. Well, before we go into what you're working on this year, let's talk a little bit about the climate in Tallahassee this year. I know last year was certainly interesting, and I hear some rumblings that this session may be very similar to last session, and talks of special sessions and all kind of rumors going around. But I know you're over there. You spend a lot of time over there. Just kind of give us your feel for what's the tone at the Capitol right now, and what's some key things that lawmakers might be focused on.
So big picture, whether it's this year or any other time, we have a massive election coming up in Florida. 2026, yes, everybody in Congress is up for re-election. But in Florida, everybody in our cabinet is up for re-election. So Governor DeSantis, either up for election or termed out. Governor DeSantis is termed out. He cannot run again. And so people often will refer to that as a lame duck session. Don't have as much power as they once had. And so their ability to drive whatever initiatives they want across the finish line, regardless of the year, can always be weaker than, of course, when they first come into that position. So we have a gubernatorial election, and then you have a number of people who left the cabinet, like Ashley Moody and Jimmy Patronis, who are now in Washington, D.C. on our behalf. So you have appointed people in the state attorney general's office and in the CFO's office. You also have an appointee in the lieutenant governor's position, because Jeanette Nunez is now the president of FIU in Miami. And so everybody's on the ballot in some way, shape, or form. Florida, on top of that, Florida is become a mini Washington, D.C. And I say that because we are the second home for current President Donald Trump and his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and many people within his administration. So D.C. watches everything Tallahassee does as much as Tallahassee watches D.C. And I think that puts us in a unique position as opposed to other states. So the President Trump and his team are weighing in on many races. As an example, Senator Joe Gruters is now in charge of the RNC that was blessed by President Trump, actually, I think requested by him. You have current Congressman Byron Donalds, who announced that he would be running for governor. He was quickly endorsed by President Trump. And from that endorsement, Congressman Donalds has been able to just shoot light years ahead of any other possible contenders at the moment. His war chest is $40 million, I believe. And the president continues to weigh in support of him and his race for governor. Florida also is one of the biggest states that went from purple to not just red, but deep red. And so we are also something that the entire nation watches, and that elevates the importance of races that you might think don't necessarily impact trends for the rest of the country. The governor, at one point, I think it was the worst kept secret that his wife, Casey DeSantis, First Lady of Florida, would be throwing her hat in the ring to run to replace him. There was a little bit of controversy last year involving a charity that she's very closely aligned to, Hope Florida. And that scandal has really stemmed the tide of support for a DeSantis to jump into the race. And clearly she has not done that yet. I think most rumors are now that she will not be jumping into the race. Your current Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, has been rumored that he would be running into the race. I think the assumption was if he jumped in and ran against Donalds, that Governor DeSantis would endorse him, but the governor hasn't yet given him that level of support. So it's a big unknown right now if the governor will hand select somebody and put him in to run against Congressman Donalds, or if he's just going to sort of sit this one out. For your listeners, they're probably wondering why there's any friction within the Republican Party and in Florida. I think had it not been for Governor DeSantis looking at a presidential run, if he had just sort of been supportive of the president and not showed an interest in running for president and then going after Trump, things would be different. But he did. He ran for president, which is fine. And then he went after Trump to do it. And so they have a cordial relationship, but it really is in the political world in Florida. Are you team DeSantis or are you team Trump? So Congressman Byron Donalds is the front runner. What does that do to Tallahassee? Again, you've got a governor in the final days of his final term. He can't run again. It does not look like that his wife will be running for office. He has yet to give a full-throated support of anybody possibly running against Congressman Donalds. And all of that taken as a whole makes him even more weak in the eyes of the legislature. The House Speaker and the Senate President, on behalf of the people that they lead in their respective chambers, have been flexing their muscles a little bit in this space. In the last few years, I think we saw speakers and Senate presidents that really worked hand in hand with the governor to secure his goals. But again, when you're not as favored as you once were, and when there's scandal surrounding something involving your family, you allow for other people to fill that space. Senate President Albritton and House Speaker Danny Perez said, we're not going to be, just an automatic green light for you. We are a co-equal partner of this government in the state of Florida, and we think we should be working together. We're not just a blank check for you. So it's caused friction, and I think it's good disruption. I don't think anybody's best served with, someone in charge treating everybody else like a blank check. I think we should be having difficult discussions, but everybody in Tallahassee is also up for reelection. So I think what you saw last year, where we had multiple special sessions, I can tell you we will absolutely have additional special sessions. Congressional redistricting will be one of them, possibly property taxes. If the governor doesn't get something he wants during the regular session, he can call them back to hear a specific issue he wants to discuss, and calling special sessions will be the last real thing he can do as governor to exert his power over the legislature. And take all of that together, and you've got friction. What's interesting is we have incredible relationships with all of these people, and that's my job to make sure we continue to have them. And our issues don't necessarily come up in special sessions, thankfully, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. So I would say it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Well, I want to talk about that friction a little bit and the bumpy ride and what that means for us. But, before we do, we've been paying attention to this governor's race and certainly heating up. And the Hope Florida situation has certainly created some interesting press releases and all over the media. But outside of that, I'm a little disappointed when you talked about governor candidates. You didn't mention Bobby Williams. That's my joke. That's my only joke I got. Come on. The guy's videos are great, are they not?
I'm laughing. That's why I'm laughing. Listen, you never know. Former Speaker Paul Renner has thrown his hat in the ring, and everybody, including the current governor, immediately bashed him. But he's raising dollars. So you never know. It could be a dark horse coming out of nowhere, and suddenly you've got a new race for governor that you didn't see coming. But I appreciate the laugh. Thank you so much.
That's true. You never know. Come out of nowhere.
Kelvin, you could run. Do you want to run for governor?
There's what, 20 or 30 people in there? May as well just throw my name in there. Let's just go for it.
All of our bills will die. We'll just have to tell everybody that right now.
Well, let's get into a little bit, just going back to what you were talking about. Going to be some friction, going to be a bumpy ride. And let's get into a little bit of what you're working on and how hopeful we should be, or you are, that we're gonna make some headway with some of these issues. So I know first up on the list, we've got we're back talking about statute of repose.
Yep.
I believe that's House Bill 255.
Yes, sir. That's the one.
Let's talk a little bit about, we had a big win with statute of repose just a couple sessions ago.
Yep.
So now we're back at it again, and it's a little bit of cleanup. So walk the listeners through what happened there and why we're talking about it again.
Well, every story needs a hero and a villain. And in this particular story, the villain is I don't know if it's the entire trial bar, but it is the element of the legal system that loves to file construction defect claims on every single completed project in Florida built by our members, most notably condos. It's the prized possession for these specific law firms. And so in 2023, we worked with a number of industry groups to pass statute of repose reform across the board. It decreased our time period from 10 to 7 years, and then it decreased the number of triggers and it cleared them up. Before, we had a menu of options, any one of them conflicted with the other. And so even at 10 years, our repose period was never 10 years. And it just makes it impossible for the industry to exist. So knocked it down to 7, and then it's 7 years from abandonment if not completed, or issuance of a TCO, CO, or certificate of completion if the jurisdiction doesn't issue TCOs and COs, which I learned something new every session, and every jurisdiction calls these things something different. And it was a huge win because it gave our members predictability. When you finish a project and people are allowed to move in and use it for its intended purpose, you're on the hook for now 7 years for latent defects to show themselves. And we can argue all sides of that issue. And I think certainly it's important because no building's perfect. But essentially, it impacts your risk of exposure and your liability. It jacks up your insurance. It impacts your bottom line all day long. And it can wreak havoc for the entire industry and also increase issues on the marketplace. But I won't go down that well. So that was 2023. It was a huge victory. In 2024, a forward amendment was filed, forward phrase was filed in a 140-page amendment to a 200-plus page bill that said, okay, we'll allow your fix from 2023 to stay, except for condos. We think the only trigger for condos should be after turnover has taken place. And if you don't build condos, all you need to know is there's no set time during which condo turnover needs to be accomplished. Often it happens very quickly. Sometimes it can drag on, but it's this nebulous, non-specific period of time loaded with gray areas that can take a while. And this amendment in 2024 basically told everybody who built condos, your statute of repose is no longer 7 years. It could be 7 years plus another 7 if it takes that long for turnover to happen. And that's obviously something we can't let stand. So this bill this year, House Bill 255, does two things. Remember, I told you got to learn something new every year. And over the years, it has become clear that recording of the date of turnover or that a turnover agreement has been reached, it's not required to be recorded anywhere that can be accessed. So part of the bill says we want DBPR to start capturing this information. We want it to be available via an online portal. And that way, if Kelvin and I get in a fight over construction defects on the condo building I built, it will be recorded somewhere that turnover took place on such and such a date. And then we don't have to go to trial and look for that as a finding of fact, which often happens. So that's part of the bill. The second part of the bill says for condos, you can keep what you did in 2024 via those 4 words. Except for any claim under 9511. Now, what did I just say? Basically, it's a tricky way of getting us back to what we did in 2023. And I'm now sharing that with the world that's going to listen to this podcast. But it says condos, you cannot tie the statute of repose period to condo turnover for all the reasons we just said. And that's the goal. And I think this is a labor of love for me because I just cannot understand the mindset that I'm going to enjoy this thing, Kelvin, that you built, and I should hold you on the hook for the rest of time anytime something goes wrong, and then I want to be able to sue you for it. And that's how the statute of repose has been abused. So I think it's a righteous effort. I think we're right in the battle, and I think it's important because every time we drag things like condos into endless litigation, we increase the cost for the end user. We increase the cost of insurance, and oftentimes the individual unit owner never sees the benefit if their condo board wins at trial, should it go to trial. So it's a critical cleanup, and I think it's just a consumer safety issue. I think it's a consumer protection issue, and we've got great bill sponsors on it. We've got Senator Jay Trumbull from your portion of the state, Kelvin, and we've got Representative John Snyder from Martin County in Southeast Florida. So excited to work with them again on it. And I think it does very important things for the industry and for Floridians.
Certainly some great sponsors, but yeah, I mean, what a huge issue this is for our members that are condo builders. I've heard the horror stories. I've talked to these guys, and man, just absolutely appalling how abused this is for condo builders and what they have to fight against. So I'm extremely hopeful that we, that we make some traction with this and get it fixed, and hopefully in years to come we can keep chipping away at it until we get this to where it's something that's certainly more reasonable and palatable for folks. Because you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is affecting cost across the board, not only construction costs but insurance costs, and continues to prove that Florida is certainly one of the most litigious states in the U.S.
Absolutely, could not agree more.
All right. So up next, we got House Bill 405, which is our commercial construction bill. Give the listeners just kind of a brief overview of what that bill entails, what it includes, and where we're at with it.
This is sort of I think if you went to Tallahassee, if you've never been with ABC, or if you were interacting with a state senator or state rep, even in their district office, and you said, what kind of bills does ABC bring? This type of bill is something we're probably most known for. On the last one, I said everybody needs a villain and a hero, right? Building departments aren't villains, but we all have to live and work with them. And there's 67 different counties and 144 plus municipalities. And everybody likes to enforce the building code in their own way. And then they are subject to whatever their overlapping local government wants them to do. And everybody looks at construction like a cash cow. So on an annual basis, we're going to Tallahassee to do things like permit fee transparency and improving building permit timelines. And really, I think this is the meat and potatoes of who we are. You all cannot exist and cannot get your projects done without interacting with all of these different people. So we try to make things as uniform and predictable as possible because you have your owners to answer to, and they don't care which jurisdiction they're building in. They just want you to deliver on time and on budget. This bill is in partnership with another construction industry group, which we can talk about the importance of partnering in a second, but like-minded headaches and heartaches with building departments. So this bill, sponsored by Representative Griff Griffiths, also from your neck of the woods, and then Senator Aaron Grawl, ironically, also from the area where Rep. Snyder's from. So we seem to be having great success with those two areas of the state. This says we want on commercial construction issues for there to be a uniform permit application. We understand that depending on what type of project it is, that building department, you may need some additional documentation, perhaps some additional plans or drawings or different levels of proof that you're meeting the latest building code. But by and large, everybody needs the same information to start the permit application process. And so it asks the Florida Building Commission by 2027 to create a uniform permit application for commercial. Now, why are we limiting it to commercial? We're doing it because it's important. Well, we love everybody in construction and we work collectively really well with our partners on the residential side as well. It's a different type of product on commercial. Oftentimes you're doing infrastructure, you're doing schools and hospitals and maybe some industrial stuff in there versus, a large scale residential development. Both need contractors and skilled trades and all of that good stuff, but the types of documentation may differ. So we wanted to limit this to commercial so that as the Florida Building Commission is doing their thing, they are in that mindset and answering the question, what kind of information do we need on this form for a commercial project? That's one part of it. The second part of it addresses a inconsistent practice by building departments relating to private providers. They are required by law, by statute, to reduce fees when someone says we're using a private provider. Some ignore that. Some reduce the fee only to then require a mandatory fee. Some reduce their fees, but then abuse the process in other ways. So the way it's written right now, if you are going to utilize a private provider for one service, it's a mandatory reduction of 50% of the fees that the building department could collect. And if you use it for two, so plans review and inspection, then they have to reduce their fees by 75%. And it's 75% of what they would collect for that project. They are not happy at the moment, but in fairness, the process has been abused and our members and the owners they report to are not happy either. So that's the second part of it. The third part of it addresses an issue that we often see on public construction contracts where the public owner includes language saying there's no damages for delays on this project. We're going to hold you, contractor, to all of your deliverable dates. And if you do something that causes a delay or there's some other reason there's a delay, you can't seek damages from us. We will not pay you to miss your deadlines and all that good stuff. The issue becomes when the public owner is the one that causes the delay. There's a number of school districts in Southeast Florida that love to abuse this contract provision. They are sometimes the ones that cause the delay, or they will change plans that then cause the delay, and the contractor incurs all kinds of out-of-pocket expenses, and they seek to secure payment from the public owner, and the public owner is like, nope, sorry, we have a no damages for delay clause. You cannot collect. We will not pay you for this, which is also not right. So all of that is in this bill. And again, it's specifically limited to commercial construction. I think the way it's written right now, we need to kind of seek some clarification. I have been contacted by some folks that represent local governments, and they don't like the bill because they said they already feel under attack from the discussion of property tax reduction. And I'll table that for a minute, but when we get to property taxes, it'll blow your mind, the things that they say. Back to this bill, I think it's a meat and potatoes issue for ABC. I think it's something that we do really, really well. And in all cases, the goal is to defend the industry and make sure that the regulatory world in which we work makes sense. And it's not something where it's unpredictable or uncertain.
This bill certainly goes back to something I said earlier, where we look across the state and we have a variety of issues in different regions across the state. Here in the Pensacola area where I am, we really do kind of have it made when it comes to permitting, plan review, and those sort of things. And then you talk to the members down in South Florida, and when we talk about plan review times up here, we talk about it in weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And when I tell those guys that, they laugh because they're talking about it in months. In some cases, I think I've even heard, beyond a year of essentially trying to get a project off the ground,
Yep. And
of trying to deal with a municipality.
in one county, it's like a mandatory 2-year wait period. They just know going into it, it's going to take them 2 years to get the permit issued. And in your industry and in this industry, the world changes every month, from expenses to, your subcontractor base and your workforce. I mean, it changes so dramatically on a monthly basis. I don't even know how you plan ahead for 2 years, but that's what we're seeing in Southeast Florida.
Absolutely unreal. Well, you opened the box on property tax, so I'm going to let you lead the way and tell us your thoughts.
So I think this issue is a good one to help get us back to what we're going to see in Tallahassee. It's an election year, so you're going to hear a lot of promises and a lot of stuff is going to sound good. I do think we will see property tax initiative or reform initiatives pass, but here's how it works. Kelvin, you asked me to give you some highlights. I didn't even give you bill numbers here because I think we're up to a minimum of 10 bills filed on property tax reform at the moment. 10 bills cannot pass on the same subject. So it's setting up a long session negotiation on something that impacts everybody here. I've heard complete elimination. I've heard for people that are homesteaded, a tremendous reduction. I've heard capping rates. Whatever passes this session, if something passes and is signed by the governor, it has to go on the ballot in November because it's our tax policies and processes for property taxes are in our state constitution. It's our number one revenue source. So any changes to that have to be voted on and supported by the voters. So I say that because as you're listening, if any of it causes you tremendous headache and heartache, you're going to have a say at the end of the day if you are a registered voter in Florida. But it's going to occupy a lot of space and it's going to occupy a lot of time in the media. I think it's all very well intended. I think the most conservative person as far as releasing plans would be the Senate right now. Senate President Ben Albritton has been quite clear that he understands the importance of giving relief to Floridians. But at the end of the day, if it is such a drastic change that we're just empowering local governments or agencies to jack up costs elsewhere and that Floridians aren't really seeing any benefit, in other words, he doesn't want snap decisions because it's an election year. So I think the Senate is probably going to slow walk these discussions. The governor has his approach. The House has their approach, and there are multiple within each one. I think they all land the plane somewhere on something, but if the governor doesn't like it, he doesn't have to sign it. And then he could call a special session and put his own path forward. I would hate to see the discussion go that way. I think voters have been clear. We need property tax relief. We need reforms. This is not something where there should be infighting to help determine who's going to be the next governor. This is an area where we need to work together. I just don't know how quickly that'll happen. So just, that's one of the areas where there's going to be friction because whoever ultimately passes that reform, it's a great thing to run on in 2026.
I've heard a variety of rumors. I mean, and we just have to assume, right, if there's some property tax relief for Florida homeowners, then the funding has to come from somewhere else, or there has to be a reduction in services or funding from the state back into the communities. Are you hearing anything? Because I've heard some rumors that potentially there could be some reduction of funding from the state back into the local communities, or even to back into some of the education funds, or reduction in funding back into the community.
So I think some of that is noise. Let's look at it this way. Right now, your chief financial officer, Blaise Angolia, ABC is a huge friend of his. He's a builder. He's one of the few people in Tallahassee that has ever picked up a tool and made a career out of it. And he is a tremendous advocate for common sense regulations. Since being appointed CFO, he has made it his mission to go to local governments and identify waste. And of course, all of them are saying that the CFO's office is lying and making numbers up. But I think what we're seeing is an acknowledgement that whether it was because of the influx of COVID dollars or just the number of people that have relocated to Florida, the budgets for local governments have grown exponentially in the last decade. And what government is not good at is keeping their purse strings tight. So if they have more money, they're going to spend more money. And part of me is not at all sympathetic to local governments who are now saying, oh my God, if you take away property taxes, we're not going to be able to have a police force. That is a massive falsehood. They have to, they're required by law. So if for some reason you start to hear that a police force in your area is going to be dramatically reduced, no, there may be instances where the police force has secured money from their local government and used it for things outside of what they're responsible for. That goes away. So I think these are parallel discussions where government does need to shrink. We need to tighten our belt straps. And if property taxes are no longer your cash cow, you still have to do your constitutional duties, but then maybe you can cut back in other ways. And that makes people very uncomfortable. I don't believe that Florida will become less safe or provide less of an education for the people that are here. I think I think that's scare tactics, and it's going to be amplified over the next however many months.
Certainly be interesting to follow, see how it all shakes out. But I could, I think like every other Floridian, certainly appreciate a reduction in property taxes.
Right?
Just be interesting to see where the rest of the money comes from. So tax talk is a good segue into one of our favorite topics that we have been talking about for quite a few years, and that is owner direct purchase. What's our strategy? What are we doing with that? I know we've talked about, is it a bill? Is it something that we could just potentially run a pilot program on a project in the state to see what we could potentially do better at? Where are we at with that? What are we thinking?
This is the issue that haunts me. This is the issue that I wake up in the middle of the night over because it's so common sense. We have a tax exemption available for public construction projects, public owners, and some charities. The way that it works is they can claim a tax exemption if they follow these specific steps relating to construction materials, ordering them, receiving them, maintaining them. There's like a 12-step process. Not really. I think it's only 5, but it's crystal clear that if you want to claim the tax exemption, this is the way you're supposed to manage it. What happens and what has happened, either intentionally or just because we're putting people in charge of a process they don't understand, the process gets jumbled and sometimes abused. And we have members who have told us that public owners will claim the tax exemption and then violate all of the steps, which puts our GCs and subs and suppliers in really precarious positions. Sometimes we hear that they just don't understand how to manage the process. So it's jumbled, which also puts people at financial risk. Nobody wants to be audited, especially if it's through just confusion over construction. So what we've tried to do is mirror what we see in other states, which one idea, which seems seamless, is Kelvin, you're a tax exempt entity and I'm your contractor, and you're going to give me your certificate for the duration of the project. And we're going to notify whoever we have to notify, and we're going to record all the things we need to record, but I'm going to manage the process for you to make sure we're following the letter of the law. That change has happened in a number of states, and we would like to see that replicated in Florida. The upside down part of this discussion, which again is the thing that wakes me up at night, if you improve the tax exemption process to make sure it's being followed correctly and nobody's abusing it, you're probably going to increase the number of people that utilize it, which the state sees as less revenue to the state. And when we tried this a few years ago, it has to go through a scoring process. It's a mandatory trigger. Anytime you touch taxes, everything has to be scored by the Revenue Estimating Conference. And these folks calculate the impact to the state pocketbook, and we would have deprived the state of $1.6 billion of tax revenue. So if you're a legislative body and you're trying to maintain power, you're running for re-election, you're not inclined to pass reforms that hit the state pocketbook in that way. And no matter how we worded it, no matter how many conversations we've had, it's the potential economic impact that ultimately is the nail in the coffin every time. What we're doing right now is having conversations with a couple of public owners. I won't divulge who they are, but they can request a pilot program where for a certain period of time they could manage their owner direct purchase process the way we just described. And it can be a test case, and we can see what happens to how they manage their project, and we can see the ultimate impact to the state. At the end of the day, we should look at it this way, right? If I am spending less to build the project that is paid for by taxpayers, that is hurting taxpayers less. If we don't utilize the process and we pay all the taxes that we have to pay, that doesn't provide any form of economic relief. And maybe as a public entity, I don't need to go to the legislature and ask for as much money for whatever public projects I want to build. But that's a tough argument to make when budgets are tight. Right now, Florida has been very specific about tightening our belt straps the last couple of years, especially now that the COVID dollars are gone. And, we're always going to be up against that economic impact and what it could do to Florida's bottom line.
Yeah, it's interesting. I choose to believe that by design that the ODP system has always been just a little bit convoluted and complicated for public owners to keep up with, just because of the staffing that they need to be able to administer the program. And they're losing out on tax savings, and the state is keeping the money. Yep. So it is frustrating to see that some of these public owners are just missing out on this opportunity. So fingers crossed. I'm hopeful that
we're going to keep trying.
Yep. Well, we'll keep talking about it. We've been talking about it for a while now, so it's a fun topic.
It is. And I'm telling you, it is the thing that keeps me up at night. We're going to get a win at some point. It gets back to what I said at the beginning. Not everything is a slam dunk every year. Sometimes you take little bites of the apple. And then use that to build momentum. And that's the reasoning for the pilot project. If we can get something like that done, it's a significant bite at a very big apple. And then we have a test case that we can build on.
I think it'd be a huge win, no doubt. Well, we're getting real close to wrapping up here. Earlier in the session, we talked about how important this industry is, how great the men and women that are a part of this industry are, and what it means to everyday life and what we do. However, there's a lot of people out there, and especially in Florida right now, that don't necessarily appreciate it or feel the same way that we feel about it. And there's been a strong sentiment of anti-development that's grown kind of throughout the state. You see a lot of noise from it. Is there anything you're seeing in Tallahassee from lawmakers, or any discussions that you're hearing regarding the anti-development pressure that maybe they're seeing from some of these communities across the state that might affect us or may negatively impact our industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a rampant conversation in Tallahassee. And here's the deal, not this year, thankfully, but in 2024 and in 2023, we had massive hurricanes that entered Florida from the southwest corner and destroyed everything all the way through to the northeast corner when it left the state. And then those regions, you have residents who saw, insane flooding and destruction, and it's scary. And when people are scared, they react any number of ways. The sentiments in those two regions of the state seem to be that the flooding and the destruction is the result of overdevelopment. And these massive residential properties are somehow now the bane of the existence of Florida, and we have to stop it. We have to stop all development. I think a more reasonable conversation, certainly we understand the fear and the devastation that people experienced. But when you talk about where Florida was, 20 years ago and where we are now, we've been pretty proud of the fact that we're attracting so many people down here to the state for all the reasons we discussed. And I think the issue became whether or not our infrastructure was keeping up with the new demand. And it hasn't. And in some cases, local governments haven't invested in it. And in other cases, maybe they're in the process and it's just not done yet, or they're just starting it. But when we build more, we also have to improve the infrastructure. And I think it's a well-known fact. We're a little bit behind there. I also think if people are being truly honest with it, some of the devastation came for structures that were built under building codes from decades ago. They're not new. They're not under the most current. There's that neighborhood, I always forget the name of it, but it was built to some code we've never even seen before in the future. and the hurricane went right over it and there was no destruction. So I think it's a fear. I think it's a conversation based in fear, and I understand that. But when we're in Tallahassee, the most important thing that I do on a daily basis is just talk to people like you do, Kelvin, about construction. Everything they see, touch, experience on a day-to-day basis is because of construction. And so to just shut the door and say we're not going to develop anything anymore is not the appropriate response. And so we are working constantly to talk about, on the commercial side, we do mostly infill. If we're building a hospital, it was requested by somebody. If you're building an addition to the school, it was requested, or you knocked down the first one and you're building the new one on site. Very rarely is our work, the work of ABC members, contributing to the most overused word, sprawl. It's all you hear all the time. So I think it's a reactionary conversation. I think it's one we're going to hear when we talk about campaigns and elections. And I do think there are corners of the state that feel like it is the worst possible thing if Florida continued to build. And we just have to do our best on a daily basis to educate people. And I'm telling you, it's not just because you had me on your podcast. I love this association. I love the work our members do. And man, I love getting to argue on your behalf. It's such a sound place to argue from. I believe in everything that we do, and I think we're appropriate in the things that we push for. So I love to talk about it clearly, and I appreciate you giving me the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing the insights when it comes to the anti-development pressure. It's interesting. We've come a long ways in this industry.
Sure.
And some of the things that we see, post-hurricane is kind of the sins of the past. And we've come a long ways from the days of how we built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I think it's just important for people to know that we've progressed in this industry. We've made improvements. We're team players. And most of the time, if you just talk to a contractor, they're willing to come to the table with a solution and talk collaboratively with people that certainly want to push back or just don't want to see change, but they're willing to come to the table with solutions. And I think it's important for people to know that and get to know the people that they're fighting back against, because they're not bad people. And quite frankly, they're providing a service to a community that communities need.
And we're everybody's favorite during hurricane season. When you lose power, man, those line erectors and those linemen and women that go up there and hook everything back up, we should be heroes in many people's books. So that's my message. I'm going to continue to hold us up in the highest light possible, because it's just an easy job and it's a great one to have.
Well, let's wrap it up with this. We got our legislative conference coming up January 21st and 22nd in Tallahassee. In your words, tell our members why they need to be there, why they need to show up, and why they need to be there alongside you advocating for this industry.
Nobody is a better proponent for the work that you do in the construction industry than you as the individual. And while I love it and I think I'm pretty okay at it, you don't want me building a structure for anybody. And so come talk to elected officials, tell them the work you do, the people you employ, the benefits that you offer, and the positive impact that you have on Florida's economy, because only you can sell that story.
Well said. Carol, I appreciate you taking the time to come on today, share your insights. And yeah, absolutely. It's been great. It's always great catching up with you. It's always great hearing your insights on what we're working on. And, it just gets you excited to know that we're continuing to push forward and fight for this industry. It's a great industry. We love it. I know you love it. You're passionate about it. We appreciate you and all the work that you do. Couldn't do it without you. Looking forward to seeing you in January. Just 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Oh my
coming
gosh.
up soon.
Can't wait to have you all in town. And here's to a fantastic 2026 for everybody. Happy, healthy, safe, and prosperous.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.